So admittedly, this was a long time coming. It started to become a minor thing on my channel, a minor thing with me that would eventually become a bit of an elephant in the room. But regardless, I wasn't sure how to approach this. I didn't want to be too negative. I didn't want to put a sour damp on all of this, because I do have some negative things to talk about when I mention this part. So I want to try to be as neutral with it, because there are some positive aspects to address with it. So as you can see in the background here, or if you can barely get it in the shot here, those are all my guitars. And yes, for a huge part of my life, I was involved in producing music. I did the Winter wrap-up cover song. I did the opening for the Analyst Bronies React. And I volunteered doing the cover of We're Off to See the Wizard as a part of a Wizard of Oz project that Kichi was involved in. This is adding on that I made numerous opening tracks to my MLP reviews. So with this in mind, you would think, with the ability to make music, it just adds on to producing content, right? And that it's cool that you can put together your own tracks or your own songs without having to look up royalty-free tracks or deal with any potential third-party music. Yes and no. First of which, there's always going to be something good out of a royalty-free track. You just have to search really hard for it. The second of which, producing music is a lot harder than you would think. It's a lot harder than I would think. And in explaining so, I'm going to be explaining my personal story of my whole life involving putting together music. So introducing to all of you, this is my full disclosure, music and production. So where did I start in all of this? There's actually a number of places involving instruments. Periodically I would play on piano, but I didn't really have the patience to learn piano when I was really young. Nowadays I would have no problem wanting to learn piano, but it actually started when I was around 12 years old when I was enrolled into an orchestra class upon entering junior high. I was being taught to play the cello. At that time, my parents believed that listening to classical music or learning stringed instruments would try to boost or enhance my will of having any knowledge involved. It's a weird phenomenon that some people do their research on. I don't know the whole story behind it. What I can say is that when I was 12 years old and I was playing cello, I really hated it because first of all, this is a big fucking instrument and I had to carry this throughout campus. And mind you, junior high was a very harsh time for a lot of people. It was especially hard for me because I was bullied everywhere I went, and having to carry this instrument did not help at all. Additionally, when I had to practice the instrument, God forbid you would ever make a mistake, because if you made a mistake, everybody heard it. So I had to be exact in everything. I was always nervous that I would get something wrong. It was pretty nerve-wracking and at the same time annoying. I did not find it fun at all, and it was putting me into a bit of a bad spot. It wouldn't be until many years later that I would actually grow to appreciate the sound of a cello, as long as you know how to play it correctly. And I think that's where it all comes down to. As a kid, it sucked when you were being taught to play a cello. If at the very least you were playing violin or viola, you didn't have to deal with carrying a heavy instrument. It's just in a case, and you just carry this case wherever you go. But this instrument, I had to pick it up, I had to carry it around, take it on the school bus. It was a pain in the ass. As an adult, I don't mind pulling out the instrument again, even though I'm bound to make a mistake. Once again, if you make a mistake, everybody hears it. But there was a plus side to all of this. After finally adapting to and understanding how a cello works, working with fingering, practicing scales, there was another thing that was running in my family, particularly on my dad's side. He had at least 2 electric guitars. And this was when I was in the 8th grade. I was about 13 years old. One night, I was just sitting with Dad. He was on the phone, and I decided to just pick up one of the 2 guitars, and he saw me playing it, and he was invested that I was interested in learning a bit of guitar. The tuning was completely different, of course, but Dad was showing me, and he was saying, "So, looks like you want to learn some guitar," and he was thrilled, and I didn't expect that. Basically, at that time, I was trying to play that Mute City theme from Super Smash Bros. Melee. I sucked at it, of course. That was kind of to be expected, but I like the sound of an electric guitar, and who doesn't? I loved listening to classic rock. I was a big classic rock dork back when I was in the 8th grade. I was more into oldies than I was into modern music. So things started to connect together, and Dad decided I could teach you a few things. This was one of the first two guitars that Dad owned, this Telecaster here. The other of which was this particular Ibanez guitar. I don't know what it's called. Every time I go to look up what Ibanez models there are, they have a bunch of digits and characters and all kinds of shit that I can't even figure out. Upon playing these, yeah, I kind of sucked at it, but Dad was willing to teach me a couple of things. He asked me, do you think you could play Life in the Fast Lane? And all I did was just play the lead vocal part. And that was just a very few set of notes. And then Dad started to play the opening riff, and I was like, oh, well, I can't play that. That looks a little too advanced for me. It started to connect that Dad was involved with guitars, and there was a different side of him that he wanted to share with me. And this would eventually become a very exciting experience. Upon doing that, I was one day taken to Guitar Center, and my mother decided to purchase me my very own guitar, which is the very guitar that I still use today. This was the red Strat that Mom got me, and this was a guitar that I stuck with for a while. It used to glitter a lot more. They called it Candy Apple Red. There's a few gouges right here. There's a few skid marks. This guitar has, it's been through a lot. I'm still sticking with it. It's a guitar that I still like pulling out primarily to just jam on anything. As soon as I got home, Dad went and got a used up amplifier, and he placed it in my room, and every now and then I would try to play with it, but it was a lot to learn, you know, trying to work with 6 strings compared to working with 4 strings on cello, which I was too accustomed to. There was that I had to know about. There was also the very idea that you could play fast and pull off a lot of what they call licks and different kinds of sounds of what made a guitar sound cool. I just grew more and more fascinated with rock music and wanted to learn the basics until a couple of years would go by and I would start to get an idea of working with some skills, trying to play a couple of solos. They were mostly classic rock solos. As far as any modern music is concerned, I had a rather different impression. Now, of course, not all music was like that, but as a kid, I was too accustomed to listening to classic rock. So I would start sticking with that, and I thought that I would get better playing that instead of just whatever modern music there was. Even outside of, you know, listening to a bunch of raw, cursing out loud noise, there were other songs from different bands in which they just came off as just a series of chords, which were just a set of notes to help create a rhythm track. So upon learning to play the instrument, something else is that one of the biggest things I was always looking forward to is Dad would pull out his instrument and I would pull out the instrument and we would play together. He would teach me a couple of things, he would teach me the scales, he would teach me some chords. We had a very close bond in that, and I was very glad that he showed me that. This eventually got to the point where one day I wanted to put together a band. There was actually somebody I knew back in junior high or something like that. My memory's a little fuzzy, but they learned bass guitar, and I thought I could find somebody who was a drummer, and if we can meet up somewhere, we would start forming a band together. It wouldn't be until years later that it started to become way out of reach. During my high school years, I dealt with a couple of things in which kind of became the last straw to break the camel's back. First of which, as usual, I was bullied in school. You know, even when I said that I liked to play guitar, nobody cared. Apparently a lot of kids in school played guitar, so apparently it was nothing new to add. The second of which is that trying to adapt to modern music was one of the other big catches that I would have to learn. And I just didn't want to do it because, once again, I had a completely different impression of what modern music was. What also didn't help is that when I was a sophomore, all the CDs that I would collect and bring to school and listen to every day, they got stolen one day. And I was very upset. It was almost $200 worth of CDs that I didn't pop in and listen to. I could not, you know, find the inspiration anymore. What also didn't help is that at one point I tried to volunteer and to be in a part of a jazz group during the music classes. As before, I still continued playing cello until I was a senior in high school, that I was no longer playing cello, and that's really because I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. I was in the judging room and I would try to play a track, and because I was so accustomed to reading cello music, which involves the bass clef instead of a treble clef, I just had a hard time trying to read the music while trying to play it. And it eventually, like for only 4 minutes, there was just pockets of silence trying to play it right, and eventually I was just dismissed. And that's when I knew I fucked up. The teacher told me, you can't read treble music, you fucked up really bad. And it was just a very embarrassing moment. But I took it very hard, and I thought that my chances were very, very slim. So finally, the biggest straw that broke the camel's back is that after having my CD stolen and no longer being a part of a jazz group, losing confidence, thinking this is just not gonna work out, I was also struggling with school. I had a particular class in which I'm not gonna name the teacher, I'm not gonna name the class itself, but the teacher was not very well supportive. As a result, for the first time ever, I had a D as a final grade. The most that I would go for are just C's or B's because, you know, whatever it is that I'm being taught in school, there was always gonna be something that would fly over my head. I was always expected to get straight A's, and it was just beyond my comprehension of trying to just reach for that. I wanted to enjoy my life, but I also knew that it was important that I would still have to pass the classes, get a high school diploma, and actually set a goal somewhere. For a long amount of time back then, I wanted to have a career in music. I wanted to be a part of a group. I wanted to play music for whatever it was that I could get my hands on. I was basically just having a rock fantasy, and this rock fantasy started to hit rock bottom during the 10th grade. And seeing that I was struggling with my classes, including that D, I just knew that this just wasn't gonna work out. I knew that I had to actually get my priorities in check and aim for a different direction. And after all that, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was just out there in the open, completely clueless as to what I wanted to do. I thought I had a direction, I thought I knew. In hindsight, it was for the better. I mean, there were some instances where there was this guy named Chris Hadlock.
I've been chasing this rock star dream for 30 years. I'm addicted to fame. I'm addicted to wanting to be somebody.
My rock career hasn't worked out the way I thought it would.
Maybe it's not meant to be.
This is my room.
Right now, I'm living at my parents' home.
This is not really where I want my life to go. Lonely, sad.
So I try to focus more on getting my classes done, even though I went through a big struggle with one of the classes that I had to get involved in because, well, it's college credit. But nonetheless, this was a different direction where I was just maybe putting together a band or trying to have a career in music just wasn't fit for me. So for many years, every now and then I would play guitar, but not really as big as I would expect before, because then I had the impression that, oh, everybody plays guitar, and it doesn't mean anything if you're a guitarist, as if you stand out among the open. I had this different mindset that if you're a guitarist, you would deserve a lot more attention. And I had a very wrong way of going about it. It was only a matter of time before I would just play every now and then and, you know, just acknowledge that I sucked playing it. And a part of me still believes that I suck at playing it. Fast forwarded a few more years, I was out of college and I was involved in the Brony fandom. Brony fandom involved different kinds of making some music during 2011 and 12, and making Brony music was a really, really giant peak. I saw that there was some guitarists putting together their music, there was Bronified, and the other which was Prince Whatever. Funny enough, I had this thought or idea of putting together a rock cover of Nightmare Night from Wooden Toaster with Mike the Microphone, and then he did it and he kind of beat me to the punch. But I also discovered he has a lot more experience with music. I think he was involved into a few groups. I could be wrong. I didn't take it personal. He was able to pull it off well. He actually became one of my favorite musicians over the next couple of years, to the point where I purchased one of his albums and I placed one of his songs at the top of the list of my favorite Brony rock songs. So getting back into involving making music, I would start to look up and find out that part of making music, especially with drums, there's a lot of software that you can obtain if you have the money for it, and one of which included a drum simulator. My dad at that time also went and purchased a bass guitar. He used it for his own purposes, but I would borrow it every now and then to try to play a track or try to record a track. And trying to get involved with producing music, it was a whole different challenge in which I was not going to give up on. I may not have succeeded and wanted to put a band together or make it a successful career in music, but I at least wanted to have fun with it. And seeing that I was in the Brony fandom and that I loved it so much, I wanted to be a part of it. So every now and then I would try to look up whatever software there was. I was able to get my hands on a software from my phone. It was an iPhone, and that was a GarageBand. It was like $5 online. And when trying to simulate the drums, it was very difficult. So there was a whole different ground, a whole different challenge to work with until over the next year or so, I was finally able to put together something. And that was one of the MLP tracks that I used for my MLP reviews, and that was season 3. And then I redid the same thing with season 4 and so forth. And this would actually become an ongoing phenomenon where just utilizing my music skills and putting it all together, it started to click to me that, hey, I can actually make music. Something turned out pretty great in the long run. At one point, I wanted to put together an official, long, legit song, and that was the Winter Wrap-Up guitar cover. This was a cover song that I wanted to put together and I put a lot of effort into, or at least as much as I would think, and in the long run, I was pretty happy with it. I finally put together something in which I was very proud of in regards to making music. Because every time I would try to play music or try to record and show it to somebody, I was always nervous. It just didn't leave a good impression, or that I was told that it was sloppy. As a matter of fact, at one point, when I was working on the Winter Wrap-Up cover and I was showing it to somebody who was also experiencing guitar, I would let him listen in on it, and then he said, it's not too bad. The beginning is a little sloppy. So it was bad. If you're telling somebody that it's sloppy, you're implying to them it's not good. So really, you kind of contradicted yourself. I went and I asked for some clarity, and apparently the beginning track it had a little too much going on with it, and not to mention the guitar was too loud, so I was advised to try to play it a little more quietly. Okay, fair enough. So I went with that, and it actually turned out to be better. But using the word sloppy was not the best choice of words. But regardless, I put that video together, and it was one of my most proud videos that I had no problem looking back at. People were happy, I was happy, it was a great in-between. This is adding on top of the fact that I was filming myself and making an actual music video. It was a very ambitious take. Things started to become a little bit of a chore whenever I was involved in making music. It took me a while to put together any opening track to any MLP review whenever I would change my opening, from season 4 to season 5 to the very final track, and it just took a lot longer than expected. And this was the result of me falling behind on doing any particular reviews, and it started to get frustrating. I didn't give up though. I just thought that maybe I would get used to it or adapt to it, and I would just get better at it at one point. So I participated in putting together the opening for Analyst Bronies React, and it turned out pretty good. But things started to turn for the worse when I volunteered with Kichi when she offered me to do a cover of We're Off to See the Wizard, which was a part of the Wizard of Oz project that would become a part of the Riv Cafe. I kind of waited to the last minute. I tried to set everything up. There was too much going on, and eventually when I started to get to recording it, I had a harder time than ever before. I was re-recording it, I was doing it over and over again, till finally I was able to get it close enough. And even after putting it all together at first, something felt off. And I thought, you know what, I don't even know if she likes it, I don't know if anybody else would like it, I don't know if this would work well if this were a part of the opening. So I was gonna turn it down, and I said, this is too much. And she said, okay. The most that I could do was just share what I had so far. And to my surprise, and to Keyframe's surprise, they listened to it and they said it was really good. And I thought, what's so good about it? There's a lot of things that are off sync. The only criticism that I was given is just fill in a little bit of an empty track or empty portion of a track, and it would just start to, it would kind of perfect it a little. And I thought, okay, so I did, and it sounded a little better, but the very core idea of trying to synchronize everything was starting to become what is my biggest obstacle. After doing the last opening track to my MLP reviews, I was just really exhausted. Fast forward to 2018, and Bliss messaged me, and she wanted me to put together an opening track to a song that she really liked, and she thought this would work really well in Revenge of Thunderblight. She wanted to find something that was more instrumental because the vocals would get in the way. So it was a last-minute effort that I put together. It was done in about an hour. It was Theory of a Dead Man's Villains, and it was one of the sloppiest tracks that I have ever put together. I didn't mind her using the song and using it as a backing track. Like, it was faint in the background to the point where you wouldn't be able to notice what the mistakes were. I, for one, was able to notice the mistakes more. And this started to become my biggest issue when it comes to making music. Trying to make music was way too hard for me. Whenever I would try to synchronize with everything, I would practice and rehearse it, trying to get it right. It was starting to become the definition of insanity. doing the exact same thing over and over and expecting a better result. And this started to stress me out. I was getting frustrated. Even at one point, I was suggested by God knows how many people that, hey, you should do some commission work in producing music for them. I completely disagreed with them because not only is it stressful, I don't even know what songs people would want me to play if they were to commission me. I mean, imagine if somebody wanted me to do a cover of Through the Fire and Flames by DragonForce. Do I look like I can play something like that? Oh, fuck no. There's a difference between just making music and then just having to get better at a particular song that would probably take a few years to master just alone compared to just making music on a general basis. There was just too much for me to process. Long after that track that I made for Bliss, which she didn't mind, she actually liked it and she was willing to pay me, in which I completely refused to because that's not a track worth paying for. I was just throwing in the towel. I was just ready to call it quits. I was done. It just once again occurred to me that music just isn't the thing for me. Even though I was involved in learning a couple of things, this is gonna drive me insane. It's gonna make me wanna pull my hair out. So all the things that I wanted, my rock fantasies and stuff that I was aiming myself for, it was reality crashing down and it was hitting me really, really hard in the nuts. Periodically, I would be sat down and I was told that I'm being my own worst enemy or that I'm just having a confidence issue. That's not even the case. There's just a whole plethora of just whatever the fuck there is that I can't even name off at the top of my head. Basically, I just wasn't enjoying making music. As a result, it felt like it was too much to do. When everybody else would want something from me and I would volunteer doing it, I put myself into this really bad predicament. I know that some people who are much better at producing music, they would have no problem doing it, but maybe this just wasn't for me. Comparatively, when I'm editing a video, I can always put something in the right place at the right time. But when you're recording something, you have to get everything right. After putting together the drums, after putting together a bass track, and just whatever the fuck it is, you have to be on top of just matching everything. And it's not even just matching everything, it's matching it with a personality, you're working with the tone, you're working with how you play it. There was an accent that you would put to it. It was a lot. I had an idea going for it, but it always came out wrong, or I just fell off sync. Of course, easier said than done, just practice and practice and practice. To which I did. I would turn on the metronome and I would try to synchronize with everything. Okay, but as soon as I would start recording, I would hope, okay, I don't fuck this up now, I practiced. But I continued fucking it up. It became this cycle of madness, this cycle of chaos. So yeah, I was just completely done. It wasn't just me being my worst enemy. It wasn't me having too much of an expectation. This was just a whole different field that I just had too much to adapt to. Or so I would tell myself. At some point, I was gonna try to get back into making music just for my own videos like I used to. But then one day, the guitar module that I used to record off of it, it stopped working. This was the device that I used, this Pod XT from Line 6. This thing had some pretty bad reviews and I wasn't even aware of it. I would find some other videos out there that I would watch where they said that you can get very sloppy sound of a guitar tone. It sounded a little too artificial. Well, I kind of don't blame them for that because you're kind of putting some unrealistic sound effects into these things compared to working with an amplifier. You know, you're working with what you had. You know, the guitar amplifier that I had when I was playing off of it, it stopped working one day. I actually had a jack stuck in there and it just didn't work anymore, which sucked because I just couldn't play off of it. It was a good amp. With some equipment that I just couldn't work with anymore, and not to mention, I switched to a different phone during that year. I switched to a Samsung because iPhone decided to ditch the headphone jack. The iPhone that I currently had, it was starting to become broken. I didn't want to come in support to that, so unfortunately when switching to Samsung, I couldn't get GarageBand, so I couldn't simulate any drums off of it. At that point, I was more than certain that I couldn't make music, period, on a practical level and not just on an emotional level. But one night during the 4th of July, after the fireworks were done, I was at my parents' house. Chrissy and I were talking to my parents and we were talking about what we like to do online, and they were fascinated with it. At one point, they talked about how much I was able to contain perfect pitch, which is supposedly a gift where you could just tell or just hear it and tell what note it is. I didn't really think of it as that big of a deal. When you hear a note, it's because you're used to hearing that note. The more often you're involved in music, the more you can understand what those notes are. I've learned majors and minor chords already. I've started to somewhat learn some 7th and 9th chords. Those of you who are not experienced in music, this is just gonna fly over your head. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. At one point, they mentioned me making music again, and I told them it's too stressful, and besides, my guitar module doesn't work anymore, or a pod is what I would say. Dad heard that, and he started to understand to a degree about what it takes to make music. And he said, yeah, Brett, it takes blood, sweat, and tears to put together something. The fact that you're willing to dedicate a lot is already an accomplishment. Long after that, I told him my pod doesn't work anymore. Like I had something wrong with the cable and I plugged it in. He decided to go all the way upstairs and he handed me his very own pod. This one in particular, which I've already shown earlier, it was actually a used one that Dad got off of eBay because I was constantly borrowing it from his. He got a little annoyed with it and he decided to find this one, and he kind of got me that as a bit of a birthday present, but it stopped working. Dad eventually, he decided to give me his other one, and part of me just felt bad because, well, how else are you gonna play music? Well, luckily for him, he was able to save up a lot of money and get his own hardware and play around with whatever guitar sounds he could play off of it. So he not only got me that, he also put it all into a pouch with a manual with a couple of sticky notes that would hint what kind of special sounds I could get off of it. He even gave me a pedal board, which would offer different options and what kind of sounds to explore upon. I was able to get my own wah-wah pedal, which I actually got when I was 15, but I didn't work with it as often because it made a little too much racket. But I would bring that forth and I just had, all the stuff, despite the fact that I just said one thing and then Dad was just coming in to support me. At one point, before I took my leave, after he handed me his own guitar module, Dad said to me, why don't you ever show me any of the stuff you have on YouTube? And well, a part of that is mainly because I'm afraid of showing anything that I make online to my parents, especially back in my teen years. I didn't want them to see me put together something really silly that's in their eyes. There was just a part of me in which I didn't want to share too much of my creations. I was very insecure about that. There's a whole different can of worms that I don't want to go too far off of a tangent of, but basically I just had that big sense of insecurity. One morning I decided to just pull out the playlist that was a link to all of my music, and I texted it to my dad. And he was very impressed with it. He was impressed with everything that I did. He was very proud that he gave me some of his equipment. I did tell him a few other obstacles. I don't have a bass guitar, and apparently the bass guitar that he owned, he sold it to somebody who wanted to learn bass guitar, which again, that's fine with, but I was stuck in a bit of a rut. So over the course of the rest of 2019 and during 2020, I would save up, I would get myself a new bass guitar, I would get myself an acoustic guitar. The next thing that I'm after is a keyboard in order to try to put a little more sound or a little more of a backing track into it, aside from just making pure rock music. I went and got my own interface where I could plug anything in. I got a new drum simulator that was much better than GarageBand. It was called Addicted Drums. There was also Easy Drummer that I worked with a trial version of, and while it worked, it was a trial version. Really, I got a lot of the essentials of putting together music again. It's just a matter of how this is all gonna come as I make my final speech about making music. So closing this off, there are a couple of things in which I want to say. First of which, I hope you all understand that when it comes to making music, there's definitely going to be a huge con involved. There's going to be a catch-22 when it comes to making music. It's going to take a lot of practice, it takes a lot of patience. It's not just playing an instrument, it's learning how to play an instrument and adapting it to whatever backing track there was to get it right. You're gonna be making a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. It sounds like it's nothing new at this point, but even if you play really, really well, even if you're really good at, whatever skills you're willing to offer, you're still gonna stumble upon trying to synchronize everything. Will I adapt better into producing music? I would like to do that, but at the end of the day, if I wanna make music, I wanna do it on my own terms. I wanna actually take my time and make sure that it's done correctly. And that's why I chose not to open myself up to music commissions, because I don't know what I'm going to stumble upon. I hope you guys understand, and I would definitely be open to any criticism if anybody is going to share with me their experience in producing music. And with that being said, hopefully you all understand where I come from with the ups and downs, and why when I said that when it comes to having a bitter side of making music, now you understand. And with that in mind, thank you for listening in. Until next time, I'm GoldenFox, and I'll catch you later.